Assalamu alaikum everyone. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun wa salamun alal mursalin walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. This is Zubair Karim again, and this is the second lecture in the series of lecture to understand Riba and Islamic finance. And as I talked in my first lecture, that there has to be some basic understandings before we go into the lecture or before we go into the subject matter. Now, as you remember that I talked about being a mufakkir, not a mukallid, and that I provided an example to you of Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam, how he was a mufakkir prophet, and because of that reason his rank was so high. So in the Quran it is clearly stated that how his thought process evolved and what it means to be a mufakkir. I gave you a detailed analysis of that in my last video, and if somebody who has not watched that video, I think it is important that you watch that lecture first, listen to it, and then go into the second one. In the second lecture, what I'm going to do is I'm going to extend this conversation further and go deeper and provide you an example first to figure out what it means to be a mufakkir, act like a mufakkir, think like a mufakkir, behave like a mufakkir. Unless we clearly understand, we may not be able to do that, and resultingly we may not be able to reach the right conclusion, or we may miss truth, or we may start believing in something that may not be true. So this is what it is in the second lecture. Now, as I stated in last lecture, that the process of fikr, it actually starts with an observation. Of course, before somebody is observing, somebody is curious. Somebody is curious. Curiosity is very, very good thing. Like Hazrat Ibrahim alayhi salam was curious that what are these people around him are doing, and if that is right or wrong. So then he started making observation. So every fikr or thought process starts with an observation. Now, not just observation, it also means that you pay attention to the available information. Now, the available information could be in terms of an observation you make, or something you read, or something you listen to, something you hear, or some data presented to you, or even an experience you have. So any and all of that could be used, or is used, should be used, could be used to gain information. Now, all our senses, and nowadays, as you know, we have multiple different ways of getting information, gaining information. All that is the first step. And in fact, that is the meaning of the word ikra. When in the Quran, the word is given to us, the first word is given to us, ikra. Basically, it starts, of course, with reading, but it is more than just simply reading. It is acquiring information by any means possible. Like I said a minute ago, it could be reading, listening, analyzing data, experiencing, whatever way. That is the meaning of Iqra. So what Iqra does, what this process does, it gives us information. It provides us information. And that is the first step in acquiring knowledge. On the path to gaining knowledge, there are steps. So this is the first step. Iqra is the first step. Now, rules for acquiring knowledge, religious or non-religious, they all are same. They all follow the same principle, meaning every every science or every knowledge, religious science or any other, starts with same process. That if you're curious, you go forward. Or sometimes things are just given to you. If you're lucky and blessed, then you have an experience that starts your learning process. But usually you starts with the process of Ikra. So that's the first process. Now, I was thinking that I should also kind of give you an opinion that there are different levels in terms of people who have knowledge and knowledgeable. So how do we differentiate them? So there is a little bit of scheme I am going to give you, and that this scheme might help you understand different level of people, so that you understand and you can evaluate yourself too, and anybody else. So as I stated, the first stage of acquiring knowledge is Ikra, gaining information. So people who have the information, and most of the people in the world do not have the information. This is an interesting universal kind of fact that any science you take, if you talk about religion, most people do not know or do not have the full information. For example, most Muslims do not know what is written in the Quran and what is written in the Hadith. If you look at subject of physics, most people in the world do not know what is physics and what is written in the textbook of physics. So that's a universal kind of thing. So what I'm saying is that the most, and because our subject matter is religious, so let's stick to that. Most people in the world, most Muslims in the world do not know what exactly is written in the Quran and what exactly is written in Hadith. A lot of them read them, especially because most of the Muslims now are non-Arabic speaking. They read Arabic texts, but most of them do not know. And even those who read Arabic, can understand Arabic, even those do not have full knowledge of what is written in the Quran. Why? Why do they not know? Because they are ghafil. They are not taking the first step. You have to put an effort to learn any information. The effort is very important. Like I said, sometime Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless someone and experience is given to that person. But for most people, an effort is required. So as most people do not put an effort to learn what is in the Quran and the Hadith or the books of Hadith, they are ghafil, or they are not paying attention. You don't call them jahil, they are ghafilins. They are not paying attention to it. But there are some people who pay attention to this, and they know what is written in the Quran, and they know what is written in the books of Hadith. For our reference, let's stick to that. Now, those people who know what is written in the Quran and what is written in the Hadith, these are the people who we should call Alims, ulama. These are the people who know what is written in the Quran and what is written in the books of Hadith. Again, one more time, most people are not like that. Very few people in the world and very few people in Muslim community are alims. Most of them are not alims. So the definition of alim is a person who knows what is written in the Quran and who knows what is written in the books of Hadith. He can or she can quote it if you want to. Now let's go to next step. It gets more interesting. Now we are looking at alims. Out of those people who are alims or ulama, most of them do not know what the meaning of what they know is. Either they do not know, or they do not know it enough, or they do not know properly meaning of something written in the Quran. So in this context, for our subject matter, let's say riba. So most alims have this difficulty that they know what is written in the Quran, they know what is written in the Hadith, but they have difficulty grasping it, what exactly it means. And that is not just for riba. This is for all, many different subjects, that most alims struggle with what actually it means. And that, again, giving you an example of any other science, that is true for all sciences. So for example, if somebody knows what is written in textbooks of physics, very few of those people actually understand meaning of that. They know what is written, a lot of people, but very few physicists actually know what it means. They all are physicists, but only some of them know what it means. Similarly, all alims, we can say, know what is written in the Quran and what is written in the Hadith, but very few of them know it properly, what it means. Now, what do we call those alims who have the information and they know what is written in the Quran and the books of Hadith, but they do not know what it means or do not know it properly? Those are the people who are ignorant. The first category was not ignorant. First category was the people who didn't even know what is written in the Quran. They are uninformed. In English, they are uninformed, or ghafil in Urdu. In English, those alims who do not know what it means or means it properly, they are ignorant, or jahil in Urdu. Now, what about those alims who know what it means, what is written in the Quran and the books of Hadith? Now, they are select few. First of all, there are very few alims in the world. And then out of those, there are very few alims who really know what it means. Those are the people who, in English, we can say they are knowledgeable, or they are arifins, they are arif, or arifin in Urdu, or knowledgeable. Those are the people who are knowledgeable. Very few of alims are knowledgeable. Now, I'm going to take you one step further. Now, and by the way, again, giving you an example of other sciences, this is true for all sciences. Most knowledgeable people, I'm talking about those ulama who know what the meaning of information is. Most knowledgeable people who understand the information, they do not understand how to use it, when to use it, or how to use it properly. So they have the information, they know what it means, but they struggle with how to using it, how to use it properly. And those are the people who also are interestingly mentioned in the Quran, that those are the people who really are unfortunate. And in English, I would say those are the people who are mindless or stupid. They were blessed with first two steps. They were given the information. They were even given this capacity to understand that. But then they struggled with how to use it properly. And in worst case scenario, which is mentioned in the Quran, in worst case scenario, they use it improperly. They use it for, let's say, for religious knowledge. They use it for worldly reason. They use it to make money. They use it to gain power. They use it to benefit their friends or families. This is abuse of that knowledge that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given them. And those are the people who are mindless or stupid. Or in Urdu, we would say they are ahmakin. Now, what about those knowledgeable people who know how to use it and they use it properly? Those are the people who are wise. They are hakim. In Urdu, we can call them hakim. They are the wise people. They have wisdom. So as you can imagine, wisdom takes many more steps before you reach that point. Now, interestingly, there are even higher levels than this that I can talk about, but that is not part of this discussion and beyond the scope of these lectures. So I would not touch it. I would stop it here. For our references, this is all what we need to know. Now, to make my point, let me give you an example, a real example in the Quran. I have to provide this example because when I go into concept of riba, you need to understand it fully by using an example. And human beings, they understand concepts. There is one way for me is to just provide you data that this is what is written in the Quran, this is what is written in the Hadith, and this is what this person says, or this is what that person says. That's one way to do it, and that is more academic, and that is in my book. You can read all about it. But when I'm lecturing, when I'm talking to general public and an average person, people seem to understand things better with examples or stories. So it makes more sense, but the examples and stories have to be right. So here I am to make my point of concept of fikr, trying to make you mufakkir, and after talking about who is an alim and who is an arif and who is an hakim, after talking about all that, let me give you an example. Quran clearly says that something known as khamr is not good for us. So a pertinent or a relevant ayah about this is in, I think it's in Surah Al-Ma'idah, probably ayah number 90, which is, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Ya ayyuhallazina amanu إنما الخمر والميسر والأنساب والأزلام رجس من عمل الشيطان فاجتنبوا لعلكم تفلحون. صدق الله العظيم. Basically, what ayah is saying is, Ya ayyuhallazina amanu, O you who believe, innamal, certainly, khamru wal maisiru wal ansabu wal azlam. 4 things are described. Khamr, Maisar, Ansab, and Azlam. Rijism, very bad things. Min amal shaitan, satanic acts. Fajtanibu, stay away from them. La'allakum tuflihun, so that you could prosper or succeed. It's a very clear, straightforward ayah, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's words have comprehensive, long-lasting, deeper meanings. And that's why sometimes things for some people get confusing. So I'm only going to bring your attention to the word khamr. The first thing that this ayah says is not good for you at all. It's a satanic thing, and stay away from it. So the question is, what is khamr? Now, when this ayah was revealed, people have general understanding of what khamr was at that time. So an announcement was made that alcohol has been made, or whatever they use for alcohol has been made. Khamr has been made illegal. So people stopped drinking alcohol, and they broke all the containers that they used to make alcohol. And that's how it happened. People, Rasul Akram sallallahu alayhi wa sallam was living this, when this ayah, of course, was revealed, message was given to people, and that's what happened. Now what happens? Few years have passed by, and now Hazrat Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu is Khalifa, and people have come to him to find out, maybe the way they talked to him was, Ya Amirul Mu'mineen, what exactly is the meaning of khamr? And he must have asked, what do you mean by that? And they said, well, there are different kind of alcohol, but does that mean this alcohol or that alcohol? So as you can imagine, these are the people who understood Arabic, and they understood Quranic Arabic, but even then they came, and this question was in the community. So Hazrat Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu had to give a speech to tell them that khamr means, not just means one type of alcohol, it means he actually provided a kind of definition that to this day, most of the people believe that that is the right one, which is intoxicants. So he, in a way, in English, we can say intoxicants. So that means all intoxicants. So that means all kind of alcohol. That's the way people understood Hazrat Umar's words, that that's what it means, all kind of alcohol. Now, let's look at now. I would give you what are, I looked at different translations in Urdu and English, and I'm giving you different examples of how this word has been translated by different translators. And I told you in last lecture that I have reviewed about maybe close to 20 different translations, at least 17, 18 or more. So these are different words used for khamr, wine, alcohol, intoxicants, strong drink, alcoholic drink, or sharab in Urdu. Now I'm going to take this example. This is an example somewhat similar to riba. Like riba is translated in so many different ways, khamr is translated in so many different ways. So let's look at what happens when we review these different translations. Now, I would tell you that just remember one thing, that if we use a wrong translation, if we use a translation that may not be right, what we come up with is an illogical situation, which does not seem to make sense. And to justify our position, sometimes we say something or act in a way that is even more illogical, that breaks even more rules. So remember, whatever we say, it should be applicable in all situations, whatever is known to us. So let's look at it this way. If we translate khamr as strong drink, well, that doesn't make any sense. What exactly it means, what kind of strong drink we are talking about. They are all different kind of drinks. For example, Rasul Akram sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself used to soak dates for a day or two, maybe even more than a day or two, and drink that sweet, whatever the sweetness would come out of dates in the water. He used to drink that. Obviously, if you let it stay for a long time, it ferments, that creates alcohol. That's not what he was doing, but for a couple of days, he used to do that. So that was light drink. Maybe that's why some people say strong drink, that if you let it sit for a long time, then it becomes strong drink. But strong drink is too non-specific. It doesn't specify what it means. So it is an illogical explanation for khamr, so we should better not accept it because it is an illogical explanation. Now the next is wine. Or before I go to wine, the word sharab in Urdu literature, well, sharab in Arabic literature means something totally benign, but what sharab means in Urdu literature is closest to maybe wine, let's say wine. So wine was the initial understanding of Muslims, and that's why they stopped drinking and they broke all the containers they used to make wine. So that's what happened. But as I told you, just a few years later, people have again questions that there are some things they make which are different. So here I would say some people can come back and say, well, the wine is not allowed, but what about beer? So as you can imagine what can happen. So translating khamr as wine gives a wrong impression because some literalist, people who take things literally, they might think that the wine is illegal, haram, but beer and whiskey is allowed. You think this would not happen? This could very well happen. So it creates an illogical situation. So the translation of khamr to wine cannot be right. it leads to an illogical conclusion. So we have to disregard it. And that's why it had to be disregarded by Hazrat Umar. Now it gets a little bit more interesting. The next is alcohol. Before I go to alcohol, let's look at alcoholic drinks. I differentiate between these two. So the next translation is alcoholic drink. Well, it creates a problem. If we take this as valid point, okay, if we translate khamr as alcoholic drink, this would outlaw all kind of alcoholic drink like beer, whiskey, wine, or whatever, gin, bourbon, whatever you name, they would be all illegal. But then what about opium and cocaine and heroin? So the people who would accept this as the right translation would have no difficulty dealing with or taking cocaine or heroin or opium. And that, my friend, happens all the time. So the people in their mind are following strict Islam and even fulfilling all the basic articles of faith, not drinking alcohol or alcoholic drinks, but have no trouble using opium or cocaine and heroin or growing it or selling it or dealing with it. See what happens? It creates an illogical situation that does not make sense. So next thing is, what if we translate this as alcohol? Now this, by the way, alcohol translation happened when after many centuries, because now human beings have learned science, they know what alcohol means. They have even probably figured out molecule and formula of alcohol. They have figured out there are different types of alcohol and their effects. So now somebody is translating khamr as alcohol. Well, that creates a different type of problem. And this is where, of course, if you say alcohol, you would outlaw all alcoholic drinks. That's simple. But still, cocaine and heroin and opium would not be in this category. That's one problem. But interestingly, it creates yet another type of problem. You must have noted people whose whole effort about this is they're trying to read and figure out which thing in the CVS has alcohol or not, which mouthwash has alcohol or not, and all that business, because in their mind, alcohol is khamr and alcohol is not allowed. So they are looking at contents and seeing that if there is alcohol in it, but forgetting that if you take alcohol that way, then banana has alcohol, grapes have alcohol, apple has alcohol, beets have alcohol, almost every sugary stuff has some alcohol. So again, it creates an illogical situation. When you say that something you use otherwise for other purposes has some alcohol, then you come up with an illogical situation again. So again, this definition does not satisfy. So what Hazrat Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu did, he actually did not, I'm not reading his mind, but I'm looking at what he stated very intelligently, what he did. He looked at, of course, he knew the meaning of the word khamr, but he also looked at what it meant. What was the purpose of this instruction in the Quran? And he reflected on that purpose, and he conveyed the meaning to people that actually that's what it is. Meaning, when he said intoxicants, that means that anything that intoxicates you is under this category. Now, what does intoxication mean, by the way? Here I would clarify that intoxication for this purpose mean that anything, any chemical that could, if you take or expose to that chemical, that takes away your capacity to figure out what is right and what is wrong. Fundamentally, that's what intoxication means. That it takes away your capacity to differentiate between right and wrong. Of course, if you take too much, you become unconscious. That's a different story. But we are talking about when people are not unconscious, they are walking, talking, but it takes away your capacity to differentiate between right and wrong. And that is the fundamental human trait compared to animals, that we humans can figure out what is right and wrong, morally speaking. Of course, a deer can figure out that one way might be more threatening for him. But we are talking about in moral terms. In moral terms, human beings can figure out what is right and wrong for them. And exposure to intoxicant takes away your ability to differentiate between right and wrong. So Hazrat Umar's definition was intoxicants. So people understood that. And if we believe, and that was the best definition so far, that would include all alcoholic drinks, and that would include cocaine, heroin, and opium, and all that. But unfortunately, you still see that the Quran, by some people, is translated as alcohol or wine. And then those translations creating problem, as I told you a minute ago. Now, challenging you further, my question is, the definition Hazrat Umar Raziallahu Ta'ala anha provided, is that the best definition for today? I haven't really read any translator to do this, and I personally have not listened to any person. Maybe people have stated, but I would tell you that whatever the definition of Khamr Hazrat Umar Raziallahu Ta'ala anha provided long time ago, at this present time, is not enough. It is not enough. It is creating, again, some problems for us, some ending up in some illogical situation which people either don't want to talk about, and that is very typical, because they cannot explain it, so they don't want to talk about it. It has created an illogical situation again, which is, see, the first thing is, Hazrat Umar's definition of intoxicant was provided because the explanation of wine was not enough. So now, intoxicant, why it is creating an illogical problem? Well, what are intoxicants? In old days, intoxicants were the drinks people were making. But nowadays, intoxicants are drugs. Drugs we use all the time. We use for conditions, psychological conditions. We use drugs, same drugs, to have colonoscopy done or general anesthesia. All these are intoxicants, some in terms of pills, some in terms of liquid, some in terms of gases. These are intoxicants. So if in literal terms intoxicants are haram, then how come we are exposed to them? See, created an illogical problem. So for present time, even Hazrat Umar's definition is not enough. We have to refine it further. We have, again, and how do we refine it? We have to do the same thing Hazrat Umar did, which is understand the basic concepts behind, figure out what is the basic principle behind it, and then provide an explanation and guide people accordingly. So I was thinking how to state the best possible present day definition of Khamr, and this is what I wrote today. It would mean all experiences. Khamr would mean all experiences, chemical or otherwise. Chemical or otherwise, all experiences, chemical or otherwise, when used for recreational purpose or for fun, result in loss of capacity to differentiate between right and wrong. That's the present day definition. Why did I say in this manner? Again, one more time. experience, any experience, chemical or otherwise. Why I said otherwise? Because nowadays we have more things than chemicals. We have electromagnetic things. We have, soon we would have experience with some type of glasses, or Google is making some things. Companies are making certain things. You would experience some things not by tasting or not by ingesting, by otherwise, but it could still take your capacity away to differentiate between right and wrong. So again, the word experience. So even when we eat something, we experience. When we smell a gas, for example, people abuse gases all the time. Nitrous oxide is abused all the time. They smell it. So any experience, chemical or otherwise, when being used for fun or recreational purpose, if it alters your mind, that is khamr. An alteration of mind means it takes your capacity to differentiate between right and wrong. That is khamr. So as you can see, that understanding of Quran is not static. It's a fluid process. It's an ongoing process. Now, there is one other very subtle point in this, and I maybe not so subtle, but there is one other thing which I should clarify right here. Some people, and this is a long-standing position for a lot of people, not just some people, people believe that in religious on religious side, in terms of religion, opinion, of course, the final opinion is of the Prophet and the Quran. But then a lot of people believe that the opinion of the first generation or early Muslim cannot be challenged. This is probably the most prevalent Islamic belief in terms of differences between different fiqhs. There are some fiqhs, there are differences, of course, and that's a different discussion. But one of the main thing is that the whatever understanding first generation has, or second or third generation has, that our understanding is not going to be as good as their generation. Let me put it this way. And that is a general understanding. Well, that, of course, is cannot be challenged if we are talking about how to wudu and how to pray and rules of zakat and rules of hajj. All those things we cannot challenge. But there are many other aspects of religion in terms of especially hukukul ibad, where this principle does not work. It's an illogical principle again. And I would just give you one example to make that point, because we are going to talk about it. Here I have already provided you an example of khamr, that the understanding of first generation, those people when Prophet Rasul Akram was living, their understanding was one, and few years later, same people, similar people, they seem to have different understanding, and Hazrat Umar had to clarify. And now I gave you the summary that why even that opinion has a problem now, because where we are in history, human being is in evolution, and as we are at this stage in 2023, even that definition doesn't work, and we have to refine it. We can only refine it if we understand the basic principle and work on that instead of literal things. We should not do that. So I'll give you one more example to make this point clear. Now, and here I'm bringing this example purposefully because I told you in last lecture that the Muslims are particularly struggling, especially Pakistani Muslims are particularly struggling in terms of what is fair, what is just, and what is true. in these areas, they are really struggling. And the whole society across the globe, all sections are struggling, including religious folks are struggling. So, in terms of justice, for example, now the concept of justice in some areas for us today is different than concept of justice for first generations. So let's, like I said in my last lecture, that when we talk about first generations, let's just talk about people who were living 70, 80 years after Prophet Rasul Akram has passed away. So I'm talking about that time when Imam Malik, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless him, I really, really, really appreciate his work. I respect him deeply because he is one of those who wrote a book. Saying something and just quoting something else is a different story, but writing in black and white takes you to a different level. So he wrote a book, the first book on hadith. So when he was living, I'm talking about that. His time, people of his time. What I'm saying is their concept of justice was different than our concept of justice today. And our concept of justice has evolved. How? I'll give you an example. In his book Al-Muwatta, there is a whole chapter about how to deal with slaves, for example, which means that slavery was not illegal at that time, and you all know that, but I'm making a point that slavery at that time was not illegal. Having a slave was not illegal. They are only talking about ethics of how to keep a slave, but having a slave was not illegal. And that continued all along Muslim rules. In fact, slavery for most of us became illegal only in 1940s. I think it was in 1948. So today, in any Islamic society, any Muslim society, Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, Iran, you mention any, can any of them take a position, their government, can they take a position that slavery is legal in their country? Can that happen? Of course it won't. It would not happen. Why? Because we have evolved. Our concept of justice has changed. For them, having a slave was not unjust. Now it is considered deep injustice. Of course, it was unjust then too, my position is, but it was different time. So now we are in a different time. So slavery is unjust. Of course, somebody would argue that slavery is still around. That's a different discussion. Slavery has changed and we should continue to work against it. That's a different point. But I am making a point that if you take a position that we could never challenge a position taken by first generations in terms of subjects like Hukukul Ibad and justice, then you're mistaken, because that does not make any sense. It's illogical. So when I went into Khamar, I provided you example, and when I would go into Riba, I would give you the same example, that's what is happening and that what has happened. So again, my message to you is do not be a muqallid, be a mufakkir. I gave you today definition of how to start in this process of fikr by collecting information, which is the process of ikra, and then gathering all the information, you may become an alim, but only after understanding what that information means, you can become an arif or knowledgeable. And if you ever become arif or knowledgeable, you better use that information in the right way and never use it in improper way, because that would be wastage of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's blessing. And then finally, I I gave you example of Khamr and how different meanings are around and how that example help us understand a thought process in Islam which is evolving. Whatever is understanding we have today, it might change in future, but the basic principle would stay the same. If we understand the basic principle about these concepts, we would not be misled. Otherwise, we would be misled. जिसको like we said say in Urdu, gumrah. We gumrah ho jayenge. We should not do that. We would be misled if we would skip the basic principle. We should look for basic principles behind these concepts. This ends the second lecture, and inshallah, I am promising you that in third lecture, I would really go into riba. And I can tell you right now is that it would start this way. That, like I said, Ikra. First, we would start making observations about riba, and that's how the third lecture is going to start. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive me for any mistakes I made. I hope I was clear. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala help you understand and forgive all your mistakes and shortcomings and raise your ranks. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.